The first time Sarah heard it, it was the sound of claws on concrete, sharp, insistent, dragging. A sound that shouldn't exist in the heavy silence of her grandmother's empty porch, 3 weeks after the funeral. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you're listening alone tonight, know I made this story for you. Subscribe if you want more comfort like this. She froze, mug of lukewarm tea halfway to her lips, the steam ghosting uselessly in the damp September chill. Upstate New York in late autumn smelled like decaying leaves, wood smoke that couldn't quite warm the air, and the sharp, clean tang of impending frost. The sky was the color of old bruises, pressing down on the overgrown garden her grandmother had loved, now a tangle of skeletal roses and defiant, leggy goldenrod. Wind chimes, Grandma May's favorite, a collection of sea glass and driftwood, clattered softly, mournfully, from the eaves. The dragging sound came again. Scritch, scrape, pause, scritch, scrape. Not a raccoon, too rhythmic. Not a stray branch, too alive. Sarah set the mug down slowly, the ceramic clicking against the worn wicker table. Her own breath felt, loud in the stillness. Loneliness wasn't a new coat. It was the familiar threadbare sweater she'd worn since the funeral, scratchy and too big. She'd come back to this house, this town thick with memories, to sort through a lifetime of teacups and photo albums, and instead, she felt adrift, like a boat cut loose from its mooring in the deep gray lake visible through the skeletal trees. At the bottom of the garden, she noticed the cracks in the porch paint, the way a single stubborn nasturtium bloomed defiant orange against the gray woodpile, the sheer emptiness of the wicker chair opposite hers, Grandma May's chair. She moved with the careful quiet of someone trying not to disturb the ghosts. Peering over the porch railing, into the twilight gloom beneath the overgrown lilac bush, she saw movement. A shadow, small and low, then 2 points of reflected light catching the weak gleam from the kitchen window behind her. Eyes, wide, unblinking, watching her. Scritch, scrape. The shadow shifted, emerging just slightly from the deeper gloom. It was a kitten, tiny, impossibly small for the chill in the air. Ragged fur, gray and white, plastered damply to its frame. But it was the way it moved that stopped Sarah's breath. It didn't walk. It pulled itself forward. Powerful little shoulders bunching, front legs digging into the damp earth, dragging the rest of its body. Because there was no rest of its body, not the way there should be. Where hind legs should have been, anchoring propulsion, there was nothing. Just a smooth, furred curve, ending abruptly. This kitten was born without hind legs. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, not disgust. A punch of raw, aching sympathy, so sharp it felt like vertigo. How? How did something so broken, so profoundly vulnerable, survive the indifferent cruelty of the world? The sheer effort in that dragging movement, the determined pull across the cold ground, it mirrored something hollowed out inside her own chest. The kitten stopped, frozen, those enormous eyes fixed on her face. It wasn't fear Sarah saw, not entirely. It was assessment, a fierce, fragile intelligence gauging the threat, the possibility. A low sound vibrated in the damp air, barely audible over the sighing wind. Not a meow, not a growl, a rumble, a purr, or just the vibration. Of effort? Impossible to tell. It held her gaze for a long, suspended moment, the wind chimes whispering secrets overhead. Then, with another powerful heave of its shoulders, it dragged itself backwards, melting back into the protective darkness beneath the lilacs. Gone. Sarah stayed frozen on the porch long after the shadow vanished. The chill seeped through her, sweat her, but she barely felt it. The image was seared onto her retinas. the tiny, determined creature hauling its incomplete body through the twilight. The sound of claws on concrete. Claws it shouldn't even have been able to use effectively without hind legs to push against. She picked up her tea. Stone cold. She shivered, but it wasn't just from the cold. A strange, unfamiliar sensation prickled beneath the grief. Not hope, not yet. Something quieter, rawer. Curiosity, edged with a profound sense of shared fragility. How did it eat? Where did it sleep in this freezing damp? How did it evade predators, navigate a world built for 4 legs? The questions tumbled, heavy and insistent. She found herself scanning the deepening shadows under the lilac, the dense thicket of blackberry brambles along the fence line, the old, rotting stump near the lake path. Where had it come from? Where would it go? The next night, Sarah was waiting. Not deliberately, not at first. She'd sorted boxes in the dusty attic until her eyes stung, the scent of mothballs and old paper clinging to her clothes. Drawn by the same heavy quiet, the same need to escape the echoing emptiness of the house, she'd made tea again. Sat in Grandma May's chair this time, the wicker groaning softly under her weight. The wind chimes were quieter tonight, the air stiller, colder. Frost already silvering the grass blades, she strained her ears. Silence. Just the distant hoot of an owl over the lake. Disappointment, sharp and surprising, pricked at her. Had it moved on? Been taken by a fox? An owl? The cold? The thought was a physical ache, then scritch-scrape, fainter this time. From the side of the porch, near the stacked firewood, her head snapped around. There it was, dragging itself out from behind a log, leaving tiny grooves in the soft earth. It paused, sniffing the air, its nose a tiny pink, triangle twitching. Its gaze swept the porch, landing on her. Sarah held perfectly still, barely breathing. The kitten seemed smaller tonight, the damp making its fur clump together, emphasizing the smooth, legless curve of its hindquarters. It looked exhausted. It lowered its head, dragging itself a few more inches towards the steps leading up to the porch. Not towards Sarah, not directly. Towards the shallow, chipped ceramic bowl Sarah had, on a sudden impulse, filled with water, and placed near the bottom step earlier that afternoon. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected it to come back. It reached the bowl, stopped, lifted its head, looking not at the water, but up the 3 wooden steps to the porch floor where Sarah sat. An impossible barrier. For a creature lacking hind legs, steps were a cliff face, a mountain. Sarah watched, heart hammering against her ribs, as the kitten seemed to contemplate the challenge. It shuffled its front paws, adjusting its position, tilted its head, those huge eyes scanning the vertical rise. Then, with a sudden explosive burst of energy from its shoulders, it lunged. Not up, but forward, slamming its chest against the bottom step. The impact made a soft thud. It scrabbled frantically with its front claws, digging into the weathered wood, trying to find purchase. Its hind end, lacking any leverage, swung uselessly, dragging in the dirt. It tried again. Another desperate lunge, another thud, another frantic scramble. Claws slipped. It fell back, landing awkwardly on its side. A tiny, breathy sound escaped. It, not a cry but a puff of air, like the last gasp of a deflating balloon. Defeat. It lay there for a moment, panting, sides heaving, a small heap of damp fur and impossible odds. Sarah couldn't breathe. The raw vulnerability, the sheer, futile effort. It mirrored the silent screaming inside her since Grandma May died. The feeling of hitting a wall over and over with nothing to push against. Without thinking, without planning, she moved. Slowly, so slowly, she lowered herself from her chair onto the porch floorboards. The wood was icy through her jeans. She didn't stand. She crawled. On her hands and knees, moving with deliberate, non-threatening slowness towards the top of the steps. The kitten's head jerked up, eyes wide, body tensing. Sarah stopped a few feet back from the edge. She didn't reach out, didn't speak. She just stayed low, present, watching. For long minutes, nothing happened. The kitten lay where it had fallen, watching her, its breathing gradually slowing. The frost was creeping closer. Sarah felt the cold seeping into her knees, her palms. She didn't move. The wind chimes gave a single, clear note. The kitten stirred. It rolled with surprising agility for its form back onto its belly. It looked at the water bowl, looked back at Sarah, looked at the steps. Then, with a determination that seemed to vibrate through its tiny frame, it began to drag itself, not towards the water, but along the base of the steps, parallel to the porch. Away from Sarah, but also away from the impossible vertical climb. It moved along the foundation beneath the overhanging porch floor, heading towards the back corner, near the old rain barrel. Sarah stayed on her knees, watching it disappear into the deeper shadows there. She heard the soft scritch-scrape fade. Gone again. But this time it left something behind. Not an object, a feeling. A tiny, fragile thread of connection spun in the cold air. Sarah stayed on the cold porch floor. The image of the kitten's futile leap, its exhausted collapse, burned into her mind. The questions were louder now, more urgent, tangled with a fierce protective instinct she hadn't felt. In months, how could it survive? Yet, it was surviving. Against everything, dragging itself through a world not built for it. She thought of the name that had flashed unbidden into her mind as she watched it struggle. Rocket. Absurd, hopeful, impossible. Like the idea that this broken creature could ever leap, could ever fly. She thought of the videos she'd mindlessly scrolled past online. Cats defying odds, becoming sensations. Could this tiny scrap? No. That was a fantasy. Right now, it was about water, about shelter, about surviving the night. She pushed, herself up, her knees protesting. She walked back into the warm, empty house, leaving the porch light on. She didn't close the door all the way, just a crack. Enough for warmth, perhaps, to seep out. Enough for something. She stood in the kitchen, looking out the window into the blackness where the kitten had vanished. The silence of the house. Pressed in, but it felt different now. Less absolute. Charged with the silent struggle happening just beyond the walls. She hadn't touched it, hadn't named it aloud, hadn't solved anything. But something had shifted. The careful numbness she'd wrapped herself in had a tiny tear, and through it seeped the cold night air, and the faint, impossible echo of claws on concrete. The story of the kitten who had nothing to push against had begun. The crack in the door felt like an open wound in the house's defenses against the night. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a faded Afghan Grandma May had crocheted decades ago, the wool scratchy but familiar, smelling faintly of lavender and dust. The only light came from the porch lamp spilling a weak yellow rectangle onto the frost-whitened grass. Her ears strained, filtering the usual night sounds, the creak of old timbers settling, the distant hush of the lake, the occasional rustle in the dry leaves, searching for that singular, heartbreaking drag. Scritch-scrape. It didn't come. Hours bled into each other, marked only by the slow crawl of moonlight across the linoleum floor. Had her presence scared it off for good? Had the cold, the sheer impossibility of its existence, finally won? A hollow ache, different from grief but just as deep, settled in her chest. She hadn't realized how much that tiny, struggling presence had already filled a sliver of the silence until it was gone. Have you ever felt the absence of something you barely knew? Dawn arrived, gray and tentative, painting the world in shades of pewter. Frost clung thickly to every blade of grass, every fallen leaf glittering with a deceptive beauty. Sarah moved stiffly, her body protesting the hours spent tense and waiting. She made coffee, the bitter aroma doing little to cut through the fog in her mind. Her first instinct was to rush outside, to check the water bowl, to scan the shadows, beneath the lilacs and the woodpile. She forced herself to wait, to move slowly, to not spook whatever fragile possibility might still exist. She refilled the water bowl with fresh, lukewarm water, the steam rising briefly in the frigid air. Then, on a whim born of pure, desperate hope, she opened a can of tuna, Grandma May's emergency stash. The pungent, salty smell filled the kitchen. She spooned a small mound onto a chipped saucer, the bright pink flesh stark against the white ceramic. Carefully, slowly, she placed it beside the water bowl at the bottom of the steps, an offering, a plea. She retreated to the porch swing, tucked deep into the corner, partially hidden by a stack of empty flower pots. She pulled, the Afghan tighter, becoming a still, quiet statue. The cold seeped into her bones, but she barely registered it. Her focus was absolute. Trained on the saucer, the water bowl, the shadows beyond. Minutes stretched. A squirrel chattered indignantly from a maple tree. A crow cawed, its voice rough in the stillness. Then, movement, not from the lilacs or the woodpile. From the dense thicket of blackberry brambles near the old rain barrel at the back corner of the porch, a small gray and white head emerged, cautious, ears swiveling like tiny radar dishes. Rocket. The name solidified in her mind, no longer absurd, but a quiet affirmation. He scanned the yard, his gaze lingering on the porch swing where Sarah sat, utterly still. His nostrils flared, testing the air. The scent of tuna was potent, irresistible. Hunger warred with caution in those wide, intelligent eyes. Scritch, scrape. He dragged himself out fully, moving with a surprising low-slung speed towards the steps. He didn't look at Sarah again. His entire world narrowed to the saucer. He reached it, stopped a few inches short, sniffing intently. A low rumble started in his chest, vibrating the air, not quite a purr, more like the hum of a tiny, determined engine. He lowered his head and ate, not daintily, but with fierce, focused gulps, his small body shuddering with the effort of stabilizing himself without hind legs. He used his powerful front legs like anchors, splayed wide, his chest pressed. Low to the ground, his hindquarters a smooth, still curve behind him. Sarah watched, mesmerized, her own breath held. The sheer will it took just to eat, to maintain position. It was humbling. He finished the tuna in moments, licking the saucer clean with a rough pink tongue. Then, without hesitation, he pivoted. His front end towards the water bowl, dipped his head, and drank, long and deep, water dripping from his chin. The simple acts of nourishment, taken for granted by every other creature, felt like monumental victories witnessed in the cold dawn light. He finished drinking and lifted his head, water droplets clinging to his whiskers. This time, he looked directly at the porch swing. At Sarah, not with fear, but with a quiet, assessing curiosity. He held her gaze for a long, silent moment. Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. She simply looked back, trying to project calm, safety. Then, slowly, deliberately, Rocket closed his eyes. Not a blink. A slow, deliberate closing, holding them, shut for a second, two, before opening them again, still fixed on her. A cat's slow blink. The universal feline signal of trust, of, I mean you no harm. Sarah felt a jolt, electric and warm, straight to her core. Tears, unexpected and hot, pricked her eyes. It wasn't grand. It was tiny, subtle. But in that silent exchange, in that deliberate softening of his gaze, a bridge was built. Do you think animals know when we're holding our breath for them? He didn't stay. After the slow blink, he turned and, with that same powerful drag of his shoulders, disappeared back into the blackberry thicket, leaving only faint grooves in the frost and the empty saucer behind. But he'd taken the offering. He'd acknowledged her presence. He'd blinked. That day became a pattern, a quiet ritual woven into the fabric of Sarah's grief-stricken solitude. Every dawn, before the frost could melt, she was out. Fresh water, a small offering of food, tuna, then kitten kibble softened in warm broth she bought specially from the town's small grocery store, the clerk giving her a curious look. She'd place it near the steps, then retreat to the swing, wrapped in her Afghan, a silent observer. And Rocket came. Not always immediately. Sometimes she'd wait an hour in the biting cold, her fingers numb, her nose running. But he came. He ate with that same fierce focus, drank deeply, and always, before leaving, he would pause and offer that slow, deliberate blink towards her shadowed corner. Sarah began to whisper to him, her voice low and soft, barely more than a breath in, the still air. "Good morning, Rocket. It's cold today, little one. You ate well." Meaningless words, really, but they filled the space, a gentle counterpoint to the silence he brought with him. She started noticing details, tiny things that spoke volumes about his life and his adaptations. The way his fur, though still rough, seemed less matted, perhaps from dragging through dew-wet grass. A small nick on one ear. The incredible musculature of his shoulders and chest, visible now beneath the fur. Powerful cords developed from a lifetime of pulling his entire weight. She saw how he used his tail, not for balance in the conventional sense, but as a counterweight and a rudder. A slight flick to the left would help him pivot his front end. A sweep to the right would correct a slide. It was a constant, subtle dance of adjustment. She saw the paths he'd worn in the grass and dirt, a faint trail from the blackberry thicket to the steps, another looping around the wood pile, a third heading towards the lake path, disappearing into the undergrowth. He had roots, territory, a life she could only glimpse. One morning, a week into their silent routine, the offering was different. Sarah had found an old, shallow cardboard box in the attic. She'd lined it with a soft, worn flannel shirt of her own, hoping the familiar scent might be comforting, not alarming. She placed it near the back corner of the porch, tucked partly under the overhang near the rain barrel, sheltered from the worst of the wind. She put the food and water inside. It, a tentative invitation to shelter. That dawn, Rocket approached the box cautiously. He sniffed the edges, the flannel lining. He looked at Sarah, then back at the box. He ate his food from the saucer she'd placed just outside the box, drank his water, gave his slow blink. Then, instead of leaving immediately, he hesitated. He sniffed the flannel again. He dragged himself partially into the box, just his front half, his hindquarters still outside. He rested his chin on the soft fabric, his eyes closing for a moment longer than a blink. A sigh, almost imperceptible, ruffled his fur. He stayed like that for 5 minutes, a brief surrender to comfort, before dragging himself fully out and disappearing into the thicket. Sarah's heart squeezed. He'd considered it. He'd rested. It felt like another fragile thread connecting them. The bond deepened in increments measured in slow blinks and shared silences. Sarah found herself thinking about Rocket constantly. While sorting through Grandma May's button collection, she'd wonder if he was warm. While washing dishes, she'd glance out the window, scanning the yard. She bought a small digital camera, something she hadn't used in years, not to make him a sensation, but to capture him, his determined drag across the grass, the way the morning light caught the silver tips of his fur, the intense focus in his eyes as he scanned his domain, the slow blink. She took photos cautiously, zooming in from the porch, careful not to startle him. Looking at the images later on the small screen, she saw not just his lack, but his profound presence, his spirit, the fierce aliveness in his gaze. One afternoon, unseasonably warm for late October, Sarah sat on the top step of the porch, not hidden in the swing. She'd brought a book, but hadn't opened it. The sun was weak, but welcome on her face. She heard the familiar scritch-scrape approaching from the lake path. Rocket emerged from the tall, browning grasses, dragging something. Not prey, but a large brown oak leaf, stubbornly clinging to his chest fur as he moved. He reached his usual spot near the steps, saw Sarah sitting openly, and paused. His ears flicked forward, then back. He dropped the leaf, seemingly unaware of it. He looked at her, then at the empty spot where his food usually was. She'd already put it out earlier. He looked back at her. Sarah remained still, offering a slow blink of her own. "I see you. You are safe." Rocket held her gaze. Then, instead of eating immediately, he did something new. He dragged himself forward, not towards the food, but towards the bottom step, towards her. He stopped about 3 feet away, well within her personal space. Close enough that Sarah could see the individual white hairs mixed in his gray fur on his chest, the faint striping on his powerful front legs, the clean curve of his hindquarters. She could smell him, not unpleasant, a scent of dry leaves, damp earth, and something uniquely feline, warm and wild. He lowered his head slightly, not submissively, but thoughtfully. Then, slowly, deliberately, he closed his eyes. The slow blink. But this time, he held it. Eyes closed for 3 seconds. 4. 5. A profound offering of trust, delivered in absolute silence. Sarah felt the tears well again, a lump forming in her throat. She didn't move. She simply looked at him, this tiny, legless creature, offering her his vulnerability, and whispered, her voice thick, "Hello, Rocket." She returned the slow blink, holding her eyes closed, pouring all the calm and safety she could muster into the gesture. "You're here listening, and that means more than you know. If you feel safe in these stories, your one subscribe helps me keep this quiet little corner alive. Thank you for being part of this peaceful world." When she opened her eyes, he was watching her again. He held her gaze for another long moment, then turned with a practicality that felt almost humorous and dragged himself to his food bowl, beginning his meal as if the profound moment hadn't happened. But it had. Sarah sat on the step, the weak sun suddenly feeling warm, the silence no longer empty, but filled with the soft sounds of Rocket eating, the crunch of kibble, the lap of his tongue in the water bowl. He was close. He had chosen to come closer. He had offered trust, and she had received it. The careful distance they'd maintained had shifted irrevocably. The thread wasn't just there. It had thickened, grown stronger, warmed by the weak autumn sun and the silent language of slow blinks. Later that day, while Rocket was presumably exploring his routes near the lake, Sarah investigated the blackberry thicket near the rain barrel, the place he seemed to vanish into each morning. Pushing aside the thorny canes carefully, she found it. Not a den exactly, but a sheltered hollow at the base of the barrel, pressed against the foundation of the house. It was lined with dry leaves and grass, meticulously gathered. A small cache of objects sat in one corner, a smooth gray pebble, a bright red bottle cap, a twist of silver foil, and the large oak leaf he'd been dragging earlier, his treasures, his safe place. Seeing it, this tiny nest built with such care in the sheltering thorns, filled Sarah with a surge of protective tenderness so fierce it stole her breath. This was where he slept, where he retreated, a secret world she'd been granted a glimpse into. She carefully replaced the canes, leaving no trace of her intrusion, the image of his little nest burning in her mind. He wasn't just surviving out here. He was building a life. And somehow, impossibly, she was becoming a part of it. The mystery of how he managed, the sheer ingenuity of his existence, deepened, pulling her further into his orbit. What other secrets did this two-legged kitten hold? How far could his determined spirit truly take him? The porch steps suddenly seemed like a very small barrier indeed. The journey, Sarah realized with a flutter of something like anticipation beneath the ever-present grief, was only just beginning. November arrived like a closed fist. The weak sun of October surrendered to a sky perpetually bruised and low, pressing down on the world with a damp, insistent cold that seeped into the old house's bones and Sarah's own. The lake path became a tunnel of skeletal trees, their bare branches rattling in the wind that now carried the first bitter promise of snow. Frost lingered all day in the shadows, stubborn and white. The world felt hushed, waiting, holding its breath. Sarah's routine. With Rocket was the warm, steady pulse in this gray stillness. Dawn still found her at the porch steps, breath pluming in the frigid air, placing down the bowl of warm, broth-soaked kibble and fresh water. Rocket's box, tucked under the porch overhang near the rain barrel, was now his accepted shelter. The flannel shirt lining was rumpled and held the faint, comforting scent of both Sarah and Rocket himself, a mingling of warm fur, dry leaves, and home. He slept there most nights, Sarah knew, because she'd sometimes see the faint rise and fall of his body through a gap in the cardboard in the pre-dawn gloom, or find him curled tightly within it when she brought his breakfast. The progress was slow, breathtaking, and utterly real. Rocket no longer just dragged himself. He'd developed a method. He'd learned to use the powerful muscles of his shoulders and chest to lift his front end slightly, then throw his weight forward in a controlled lunge, landing on his front. Pause and immediately preparing for the next thrust. It wasn't walking. It was a unique, determined hop-drag propulsion. He could cover ground faster now with less exhausting friction. He'd mastered the porch steps. Sarah had watched. Heart in her throat as he'd sized up the bottom step one morning. Instead of the futile chest slamming of weeks past, he'd positioned his front paws firmly on the step's edge, gathered his incredible shoulder muscles, and launched his front half upwards. For a terrifying second, his hindquarters swung wildly, unsupported, but then his front claws dug in, finding purchase on the weathered wood of the porch floor itself. With a grunt of effort and a powerful heave, he'd hauled his entire body up onto the porch level. He'd done it. Sarah had cried silent, proud tears into her coffee mug. He'd conquered his mountain. He spent more time on the porch now. He'd eat his breakfast, then often linger, exploring the new terrain with intense curiosity. He'd investigate the stacked flower pots, sniff the legs of the wicker chairs, watch the wind chimes with wide, fascinated eyes when the wind stirred them. Sometimes, he'd simply stretch out on the sun-warmed, though never truly warm, boards near Sarah's feet as she sat reading or just watching the gray lake, soaking in the relative safety and the faint residual heat trapped by the porch roof. His proximity was a quiet miracle. Sarah could now hear the soft rasp of his tongue grooming his chest fur, the tiny clicks of his claws on the wood as he adjusted his position. She could see the intricate pattern of stripes on his gray fur, the way the white on his chest fanned out like a little bib. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from his small body when the wind died down. The intimacy of it was profound, wordless. Have you ever shared a silence so deep it felt like a conversation? One raw, windy morning after Rocket had finished his meal and was performing his meticulous post-breakfast grooming ritual, a complex maneuver involving balancing on one front paw while licking the other, Sarah noticed something glinting near the base of the rain barrel, just outside, his box shelter. It wasn't part of his usual cache she'd glimpsed in the thicket. Curiosity nudged her. Once Rocket had hopped down the steps, a controlled slide he'd perfected, using his tail as a rudder, and disappeared towards the lake path, Sarah walked over to investigate. Tucked against the damp brick foundation, half hidden by a curled brown leaf, was a small, perfect seashell. A creamy white moon snail shell, smooth and cool to the touch, spiraling to a delicate point. Sarah picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. It was clean, unbroken, beautiful. Lake shells were common, enough along the shore, but this one was pristine. Had Rocket brought it? The image formed in her mind. The tiny, determined kitten dragging himself across the cold sand, spotting the shell, somehow picking it up in his mouth and carrying it all the way back here. An offering? A gift? Her heart swelled. She carefully placed it back where she found it, a secret treasure just for him, or perhaps for her. The next morning, there was something else. Not by the rain barrel, but placed deliberately on the worn welcome mat just outside the kitchen door. A door Rocket had never attempted to approach before. It was a smooth, oval river stone, dark gray and veined with white quartz, cold and heavy in Sarah's palm. Again, clean, chosen. She placed it beside the seashell near the barrel, a tiny gallery growing. Then, 2 days later, another item appeared on the mat. A single, vibrant red maple leaf, perfectly preserved. Its points, sharp, its color a startling slash of fire against the gray porch boards. Sarah smiled, touched by the instinctive curation. He was sharing his world, the beautiful things he found on his explorations. It felt like a language deeper than meows, a testament to their bond. She started leaving small things near his box in return. A soft feather she found, a smooth acorn, a brightly colored button from Grandma May's collection. She'd check later to see if he'd taken them into his box or thicket cache. Sometimes they were gone, sometimes they remained, as if politely declined. The exchange felt sacred, private. But then, the gifts changed. It was a Tuesday. The sky, the color of lead, the air thick with the damp chill that precedes snow. Sarah opened the kitchen door to place Rocket's breakfast bowl down and froze. On the mat, lying starkly against the faded coir, was a small dead field mouse. It wasn't mangled, not hunted in the traditional sense. It looked intact, placed, like the shell, the stone, the leaf. A cold prickle, very different from the morning chill, ran down Sarah's spine. This wasn't a beautiful object. This was prey. Was this Rocket's idea of a gift? A contribution? She'd read about cats bringing presents to their humans. But Rocket wasn't a typical cat. He couldn't hunt like one. Had he found it dead? Or had he managed to catch it? The thought was unsettling. She disposed of it quickly, her stomach turning slightly, trying to rationalize it. A natural instinct. Even for him. A sign he was thriving, capable. But the innocence of the shells and stones was fractured. 2 days later, the offering was worse. Sarah stepped out into the brittle cold before dawn, the porch light casting long, distorted shadows. Rocket's food bowl sat untouched, and on the mat, arranged with a horrifying, deliberate neatness, were 3 small brown feathers. Sparrow feathers, she thought. Not plucked, but placed, like a tiny macabre bouquet. They were clean, but their presence screamed violence. Sarah's breath caught. Where was Rocket? She scanned the yard, the gray light leaching color from everything. The blackberry thicket was still. The lake path was empty. A deep unease, cold and heavy, settled in her gut. Was he bringing her trophies? Was he capable of this? The image of his powerful shoulders, his focused intensity. Could he ambush a bird? It seemed impossible without hind legs to pounce, but she didn't know. She didn't know what he was truly capable of out there in the wild edges of the property. The mystery she'd cherished was curdling into something darker. She scooped up the feathers, her hands trembling slightly, and threw them deep into the woods. The unease grew, fed by silence. Rocket came for his breakfast later that morning, acting perfectly normal, eating with gusto, giving his slow blink, hopping down to explore. He seemed utterly unaware of the disquiet he'd sown. Sarah watched him, a knot of worry tightening in her chest. She tried to dismiss it. Instinct. Survival. But the purity of their connection felt stained. Has an animal ever brought you something? That unsettled you, made you question the gentle bond you thought you shared. Then came the morning that shattered the fragile peace entirely. Sarah woke to an unnatural silence. The wind had died completely. The world outside the window was utterly still, wrapped in a thick, freezing fog that muffled every sound and reduced visibility to mere feet. It was the kind of fog that felt alive, pressing against the windows, swallowing the familiar shapes of trees and the lake. Anxious, she dressed quickly, the cold in the house biting deep. Rocket hadn't been in his box when she'd last checked, before bed. The fog felt like a shroud. She opened the kitchen door, the fog swirling in like cold smoke. She placed the food bowl down on the mat, the clatter unnaturally loud in the muffled world. That's when she saw it. Not on the mat, but just beside it, half veiled by the tendrils of fog. A small, dark shape. Her blood ran cold. Not feathers. Not a mouse. It was a tiny, perfect baby bird. A chick, impossibly small, its downy feathers, still fluff. Its neck was broken, cleanly, deliberately, placed with the same horrifying care as the feathers, the mouse. This wasn't found carrion. This was killing. Fresh killing. Sarah recoiled, a gasp tearing from her throat. She stumbled back into the kitchen, slamming the door shut, leaning against it, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird itself. The image was seared into her mind. The fragile body, the unnatural angle of the neck, the fog coiling. Around it like a spectral hand. Rocket. It had to be Rocket. But how? How could he catch a baby bird? Where had he even found a nest this late in the year? The question screamed in her head, colliding with revulsion and a crushing sense of betrayal. The sweet, trusting creature who blinked slowly at her, who slept in the box she'd made, who conquered steps. Was he also this? A killer? Bringing her his grim trophies? She couldn't breathe. The warm kitchen felt suffocating, the silence oppressive. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the cold linoleum, drawing her knees to her chest, trembling violently. The grief she'd carried for Grandma May, the loneliness, the fragile hope Rocket had kindled, it all crashed together with this horrifying discovery. Was she naive? Had she romanticized a wild creature driven by base instincts she didn't understand? The bond she'd treasured felt like a lie, something sharp and dangerous hidden beneath soft fur and slow blinks. Tears, hot and shameful, spilled down her cheeks. She'd let him in. She'd trusted him. And now, this. A sound pierced the muffled silence outside. Not the familiar scritch-scrape-hop. A different sound, a harsh, guttural caw. Then another, close. Too close. Sarah lifted her head, wiping her eyes with a shaky hand, peering through. The fogged glass of the kitchen door, perched on the porch railing, barely visible in the thick mist, was a large, sleek crow. Its feathers were black as oil, its eyes sharp, intelligent beads of jet. It wasn't looking at the door. It was staring, with unnerving intensity, down at the spot where the tiny bird lay. It tilted its head, then let out another rasping caw, a sound full of menace and possession. It hopped down from the railing, landing silently on the porch boards, just a few feet from the dead chick. It took a step closer, its head bobbing. Sarah froze. The crow. It had been watching. She remembered seeing it occasionally over the past weeks, perched high in the bare maple tree, flying low over the lake path, always observing. But now here it was, bold and close, drawn by the offering on her porch. Was it the crow who... The thought hit her like a physical blow. Had the crow killed the chick? Had Rocket merely found it? Brought it? Like the shell in the stone? Was he, in his innocent way, still just bringing her something he found precious or strange? The relief that washed over her was so intense. It was dizzying, followed immediately by a wave of crushing guilt for doubting him. But the question remained. Why was the crow here now? Why was it so interested? And why had Rocket brought this particular gruesome object? The crow took another step towards the tiny body, its beak opened slightly. Sarah acted without thought. She scrambled to her feet, yanked the door open, and shouted, waving her arms. Go on! Get out of here!" The crow exploded upwards. With a raucous, offended scream, powerful wings beating the fog into swirling eddies. It landed on the roof gutter, glaring down at her, cawing furiously. Sarah stood there, breathing hard, staring at the spot where the chick had lain. It was gone. The crow must have snatched it in the instant she'd startled it. Only a single tiny gray down feather remained, stuck to the damp wood. She looked out into the yard, into the impenetrable fog. Where was Rocket? Was he watching? From the mist? Had he seen the crow? Had he seen her shout? The unease hadn't vanished with her realization. It had deepened, transformed. The crow's presence, its boldness, its clear interest in Rocket's gift. It felt ominous, a pattern she couldn't decipher. Why did the crow seem so fixated? Was it a predator seeing Rocket as competition, or something else? And Rocket, what had driven him to bring back this terrible thing? Had he sensed the crow's presence? Was it a warning? A cry for help? Or simply the innocent act of a creature who didn't understand death, only the strange, compelling nature of objects? Found. The fog pressed closer, swallowing the crow's angry cries, muffling the world. Sarah stood alone on the porch, the single down feather a tiny, terrible question mark at her feet. The safe, quiet rhythm of their world was broken. The mystery wasn't solved. It had grown thorns and claws, and wings of oily black. She wrapped, her arms around herself, shivering, not just from the cold. Where was Rocket? What had he seen? What did the crow want? And what did the tiny broken bird truly mean? The fragile trust felt stretched thin over a chasm of unknowns. The story had taken a sharp, chilling turn into the fog. If this gentle story brought even a tiny smile or calm to your heart, would you consider subscribing? It helps me keep sharing these soft moments for you and for anyone who needs peace tonight. But peace felt very far away. Something was watching. Something had taken the offering. And Rocket was out there, somewhere in the blinding gray, a tiny two-legged shadow in a suddenly much larger, much darker world. The cliffhanger wasn't just about Rocket's safety anymore. It was about the nature of the bond itself, tested by blood and feathers, and the cold, intelligent eyes in the mist. The leap he needed to make next wasn't onto a porch step. It was through a veil of fear and uncertainty, and Sarah had no idea where or if he would land. The fog didn't lift. It clung, thick and suffocating, for 3 days. 3 days where the world existed only in shades of gray, sound muffled, shapes distorted into looming unfamiliar monsters. 3 days where Sarah's porch felt like the edge of a precipice, the impenetrable whiteness beyond humming with unseen threats. 3 days without Rocket. His food bowl sat untouched on the mat, the kibble hardening, the water filming over with dust. His box shelter remained empty, The flannel shirt cold and still. The silence was deafening, worse than before he'd appeared, because now it was filled with the echo of that tiny broken bird and the rasping caw of the crow. Sarah paced. She stood at the windows, peering uselessly into the void. She called his name, her voice swallowed instantly by the fog. "Rocket! Rocket, where are you?" Only silence answered. Have you ever felt a silence so heavy it pressed on your chest? Guilt warred with fear, a corrosive mix. She doubted him. She'd recoiled from his gift, screamed at the crow, slammed the door. Had he seen? Had he heard the disgust in her voice? Had he felt her fear, misinterpreted it as rejection? The image of him watching from the mist, seeing her shout, seeing the crow snatch his offering, it haunted her. Or worse, had the crow turned on him? That sleek, intelligent predator with its jet-black eyes and sharp beak? Rocket, with his unique ground-bound movement, would be terrifyingly vulnerable. The thought was a physical agony, a cold knife twisting in her gut every time she looked at the empty porch. She ventured out, armed with a flashlight that barely pierced the gloom, its beam a weak, diffused cone swallowed by the white. She checked. The blackberry thicket carefully parting thorns, her hands scratched and bleeding. His little nest was there, the dry leaves and grass undisturbed. His treasures, the shell, the stone, the silver foil, the oak leaf, untouched. No sign of struggle, no sign of him. She followed his worn path towards the lake, the beam catching, only the skeletal outlines of reeds emerging ghostly from the fog. The path ended at the water's edge, the lake itself invisible, a vast, silent nothingness. "Rocket!" Her call vanished without an echo. She walked the perimeter of the property, calling until her throat was raw, the flashlight beams sweeping over frost-rimed grass, skeletal bushes, the looming indistinct shapes of trees. Nothing. Only the oppressive silence and the cold, damp air pressing against her skin. The crow appeared twice. Once, perched high on the power line, a stark black silhouette against the gray sky, watching her futile search. The second time, it landed boldly on the porch railing while she was inside, peering through the window with its head cocked, as if assessing the emptiness. Sarah banged on the glass, shouting, but it merely flapped its wings lazily, cawed once, a sound like tearing metal, and flew off, vanishing into the fog. Its presence felt like a taunt, a reminder of the danger, a confirmation of her worst fears. On the third night, the fog finally began to thin, shredded by a rising wind that moaned in the eaves and rattled the sea glass chimes with a frantic, discordant clatter. Sarah sat huddled on the floor by the kitchen door, wrapped in Grandma May's afghan, her back against the cold wood. She hadn't slept properly in days. Every rustle outside, every moan of the wind sent her heart leaping into her throat. Was it him? Was it the crow? Was it nothing? The uncertainty was a torture. She listened, straining, her body rigid, with exhaustion and dread. The wind howled louder, carrying with it a new, sharper bite. The temperature was plummeting. A storm was coming, a real storm. The first blizzard of the season whispered on the weather reports, a monster rolling down from Canada. Scritch, scrape. Sarah's breath hitched. She froze, ears straining. Had she imagined it? Wishful thinking conjuring the sound out of the wind's moan, scritch, scrape, hop, thud. It was faint, muffled by the wind and distance, but unmistakable. The unique rhythm of Rocket's movement, coming from the back of the house. Near the old, dilapidated woodshed tucked against the rear corner, half collapsed and filled with decades of forgotten junk. Hope, wild and painful, surged through her. She scrambled to her feet, fumbling with the door latch, the afghan falling. Forgotten. The wind whipped in as she yanked it open, icy and fierce, stealing her breath. The fog was thinner now, swirling like tattered gray veils, revealing glimpses of the dark yard. She grabbed the heavy flashlight from the counter, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She ran, not caring about the cold biting through her thin sweater, not caring about the darkness. Around the side of the house, the wind tearing. At her hair, the beam of the flashlight jerking wildly. "Rocket! Rocket! I'm here!" Scritch, scrape, hop. Louder now, definitely from the woodshed. She skidded to a stop in front of the sagging structure. The door hung askew on one hinge. Inside was impenetrable blackness, smelling of damp, rot, old motor oil, and mice. She shone the beam inside, cutting through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light. Piles of broken furniture, stacks of mildewed newspapers, coils of rusty wire, movement. In the far corner, behind a stack of warped plywood, a small, huddled shape, gray and white fur plastered flat, trembling violently. "Rocket! Rocket!" Sarah choked out, relief flooding her so intensely her knees nearly buckled. She rushed forward, heedless of the debris crunching underfoot. "Oh, baby, it's okay. I'm here. I'm here." He didn't run. He didn't even lift his head. He just trembled, a continuous violent shiver racking his small frame. As the beam settled on him, she saw why. His fur was soaked through, icy cold to the touch even before she reached him. He was caked in mud, leaves, and something dark and viscous. Oil. He'd clearly been trapped somewhere wet and freezing. His powerful shoulders were hunched, his head tucked low, and his eyes, when he finally lifted his head towards the light, his eyes were wide. Pupils dilated with terror, reflecting the beam like shattered green glass. Not just cold, utterly terrified. "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. She knelt in the filthy muck, ignoring the cold seeping through her jeans, the sharp edges digging into her knees. She reached out slowly, her own hand, trembling. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." He flinched as her fingers brushed his soaked fur, a tiny, strangled sound escaping him. Not a hiss, but a whimper of pure fear. The sound tore at her heart. He'd never flinched from her touch before. He'd blinked at her. Now he looked at her as if she were another predator. Had the crow attacked him? Had he been trapped? What horrors had he endured in the fog? "Shh," she soothed, her voice thick with tears she couldn't hold back. They streamed down her, face hot against her wind-chilled skin. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I scared you. I'm sorry I doubted you. Please, please, let me help you." Her hand hovered over his shivering back, afraid to touch him again, afraid he'd try to bolt back into the freezing darkness. "You're freezing. You need warmth. Please, Rocket. Please trust me." He stared at her, those huge, terrified eyes searching her face. The wind howled outside the shed, rattling the loose tin on the roof, a banshee wail. A gust tore through the broken door, carrying a flurry of icy sleet. Rocket flinched again, pressing himself harder against the cold plywood, a full-body shudder racking him. He was hypothermic. He wouldn't survive the night out here. Panic, sharp and desperate, clawed at Sarah's throat. Then slowly, trembling so violently it looked like a seizure, Rocket did something extraordinary. He didn't move towards her. He didn't blink. Instead, with a visible effort that seemed to cost him everything, he stretched out one small, muddy front paw, not towards her hand, but towards the beam of the flashlight itself, as if reaching for the only warmth he could see. His claws, usually retracted when he was near her, were extended, tiny hooks catching the light. The gesture was heartbreakingly vulnerable, a silent plea from a creature pushed beyond endurance. "Help me. I'm so cold. I'm so scared." Sarah's breath hitched in a sob. Without hesitation, she scooped her hands beneath his icy, trembling body. He didn't fight. He didn't make a sound. He simply collapsed into her cupped palms, a small, sodden weight, his head lolling weakly against her thumb. He felt terrifyingly light, terrifyingly cold. The chill of him seeped into her skin instantly. She cradled him against her chest, tucking. The Afghan sheet grabbed automatically around his shivering form, trying to shield him from the wind as she stumbled out of the shed and back towards the house. His tiny heart hammered against her palm, a frantic, fragile flutter. He buried his face into the crook of her elbow, a tiny, broken sigh escaping him. She kicked the kitchen door shut behind her, leaning back against it, gasping, holding Rocket close. The warm air of the house hit them like a physical blow after the shed's icy tomb. She sank to the floor right there, her back against the door, cradling him. She peeled back the Afghan slightly. He was a mess. Mud, oil, and something else. A dark, sticky substance matting the fur on his side. Blood? Her own blood ran cold. She gently probed, her fingers finding a shallow, ragged gash along his flank, hidden beneath the filth. Not deep, but angry-looking. Claw marks, beak marks. The crow. It had to be. "Oh, baby," she whispered, fresh tears falling onto his filthy fur. "What did it do to you?" She rocked him gently. "You're safe now. I've got you. I promise, I've got you." She needed to warm him, slowly, carefully. Hypothermia was deadly. She remembered reading about it. Rapid warming could send him into shock. She carried him, still bundled, into the small downstairs bathroom, the warmest room in the house thanks to old, cranky heating pipes running beneath it. She closed the door, trapping the warmth. She laid towels on the closed toilet lid, creating a nest. Gently, oh so gently, she unwrapped the Afghan. Rocket lay limp, shivering less violently now, but his breathing was shallow, rapid. His eyes were half closed, glazed. Fear spiked again. Was he fading? She filled the sink with lukewarm water, not hot. She found the softest washcloth she could. She needed to get the freezing mud and oil off him, assess the wound, get him dry. She dipped the corner of the washcloth in the water, wrung it out. "It's okay, sweet boy," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Just gonna get you clean, just a little warm water." She brought the damp cloth towards his muddy flank. He flinched, a weak attempt to curl away, a tiny, pained mew escaping. Him. Sarah froze, her heart breaking anew. "Shh, I know. I know it hurts. I'm sorry." She waited, her own breath shaky. She hummed softly, a tuneless lullaby Grandma May used to hum, her thumb stroking the only clean patch of fur she could, find behind his ear. Slowly, the tension in his tiny body eased, minutely. His breathing slowed, just a fraction. He didn't open his eyes. With infinite slowness, infinite care, Sarah began to clean him. The warm water loosened the mud, revealing the gray and white fur beneath. She worked around the wound on his flank, cleaning the edges with damp cotton, balls dabbing gently. It wasn't deep, thank God, but it was inflamed. She cleaned the oil from his chest, his paws. He lay passive in her hands, his body slowly warming, his shivering subsiding into an occasional tremor. As she worked, cleaning the grime from his face with a damp corner of the cloth, his eyes opened. Not wide with terror this time. Heavy-lidded, exhausted, but clear. He looked up at her, and then, slowly, deliberately, his eyes half closed, and he blinked. A slow, deliberate blink, holding it. Just for her. The dam broke. A sob ripped from Sarah's throat, raw and unrestrained. Tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the towel beside him. She bowed her head, her forehead resting gently against his clean, damp fur, her shoulders shaking. All the fear, the guilt, the desperate relief, the overwhelming love for this tiny, broken, impossibly brave creature, it flooded out in great heaving sobs. She cried for the chick she'd misunderstood, for the crow's cruelty, for the days of terror in the fog, for his pain and cold and fear, for her own doubt. She cried for Grandma May, the loneliness, the feeling of being adrift. She cried because he was alive, because he'd come back, because even after everything, he'd blinked. She felt it then, a tiny movement against her cheek, not a flinch, a gentle, deliberate press. Rocket, too weak to lift his head, had stretched his neck just enough to press his small, damp forehead against her skin. A silent offering, a tiny, profound gesture of connection, of forgiveness, of trust, reclaimed in the warm, quiet sanctuary of the bathroom. It wasn't a nuzzle, it was a leaning, a sharing of warmth, a silent, "I'm here too. It's okay." Sarah lifted her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing tears and dirt. She looked down at him. He looked back, his green eyes holding hers, clearer now, warmer. The terror was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something else, a quiet recognition. He let out a sound so soft it was almost inaudible beneath her ragged breathing. Not a meow, not a purr, a sigh, a deep, shuddering sigh of release. Then, his eyes drifted closed, his body going completely limp against the towels, his breathing deepening into the rhythm of exhausted sleep. He felt warm, truly warm, alive, safe. Every time someone subscribes, it's like another little light turns on in this peaceful corner of YouTube. If this story touched you tonight, please stay with me. I'd love to share more soft, sleepy cat tales with you. The words echoed in her mind, not as a prompt, but as a sudden, piercing understanding of what this meant. This fragile connection, this hard-won trust, this tiny life saved from the freezing dark. It was a light, a small, defiant light against the vast indifference of the world. She sat back on her heels, watching him sleep, the rise and fall of his small chest beneath the clean towel she draped over him. The wind howled outside, the blizzard unleashing its fury, hurling sleet against the bathroom window. But inside, it was warm, quiet, safe. The crow, the fog, the dead chick, the fear, they were locked outside. Here, there was only the soft sound of his breathing, the lingering scent of warm water and clean fur, and the profound, wordless understanding that passed between them as he slept. He hadn't brought her death. He'd brought her a warning, a plea, a desperate attempt to communicate the danger he sensed, the predator circling his world. And she, in her fear and grief, had almost missed it, almost lost him. Sarah reached out, her finger tracing the clean fur along his spine. Feeling the warmth radiating from him, she finally understood. Every shell, every stone, every leaf, and yes, every feather, every grim offering, it hadn't been about hunting or trophies. It had been Rocket's language, his way of showing her his world, the beautiful and the terrifying. He'd been trying to tell her about the crow all along, trying to share the burden of the shadow that followed him, and she'd finally learned to listen. The mystery hadn't been about Rocket's capability for violence. It had been about his profound, instinctive need to connect, to be understood, even when the message was written in feathers and blood and fear. The leap of faith hadn't been his onto the porch. It had been hers, into the terrifying unknown of his silent communication. And in the warm stillness of the bathroom, with the storm raging outside and a tiny two-legged miracle sleeping in her makeshift nest, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that she'd landed. She finally saw him, truly saw him, and he had chosen against all odds to let her in. The storm outside was just beginning, but the one inside her heart had finally, blessedly, passed. The storm raged for 2 days. a relentless, howling beast that hurled snow and ice against the old house, sealing them in a cocoon of white noise and wind shriek. Inside the little bathroom, warmed by the cranky pipes and lit by a single soft bulb, a different kind of storm subsided, one of fear, of doubt, of near loss. In its place grew a quiet, fierce certainty. Rocket slept. Deep, healing sleep, curled on the nest of towels Sarah refreshed constantly, tucked safely in the warmest corner. The shallow gash on his flank, cleaned and treated with a dab of antibiotic ointment Sarah found in Grandma May's ancient first aid kit, began to pinken at the edges, losing its angry inflammation. His fur, once matted with mud and oil and terror, fluffed back into soft gray and white, smelling faintly of the gentle oatmeal-based Kitten shampoo Sarah used with infinite care. The profound cold that had leached into his bones was replaced by a steady, radiating warmth. He ate tiny amounts of warmed broth from Sarah's fingertip, then soft food from a saucer held close, his green eyes regaining their sharp intelligence, watching her every move with a new kind of closeness. Sarah barely left the bathroom. She slept curled on the bath mat, wrapped in the Afghan, waking at every tiny shift or sigh from Rocket. She read aloud to him, snippets of Grandma May's gardening journals, poems from a battered anthology, the weather forecast predicting the storm's eventual end. Her voice, low and steady, became another layer of warmth in their sanctuary. She watched the rise and fall of his sides, the slow flick of his tail tip as he dreamed, the way his ears twitched at the wind's louder shrieks. Each sign of returning vitality was a balm on her own bruised spirit. The guilt over doubting him, the horror of the crow and the dead chick, the terror of his disappearance, they didn't vanish, but they softened, absorbed into the profound relief of having him safe, warm, and trusting again. He'd pressed his forehead to her skin. He'd blinked. He'd sighed. That silent language, almost lost in the fog, was rebuilding, word by precious word. When the wind finally died on the third morning, leaving a world buried under 2 feet of pristine, blinding white snow, Rocket was ready. He stirred as Sarah opened the bathroom door, stretching his front legs with a tiny, luxurious groan, his back arching in a smooth curve that ended where his hind legs should have been. He looked at the open door, then at Sarah, and gave a single clear mew. Not a demand, a question, an announcement. "I'm ready." Sarah bundled him into a makeshift, sling fashion from the softest flannel shirt she owned, securing him snugly against her chest, his head peeking out. Stepping onto the back porch was like stepping onto another planet. The silence was absolute, profound, broken only by the soft crunch of her boots sinking into the deep powder. The sun, weak but brilliant, reflected off the snow, making the world painfully bright. Every branch, every fence post, every curve of the forgotten garden ornaments was sculpted in pure white. The lake was a vast, frozen plain, merging seamlessly with the snow-covered shore. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly transformed. Rocket's head swiveled, taking it all in, his eyes wide, nostrils flaring at the sharp, clean scent of snow and ice. He wriggled slightly in the sling, a soft rumble starting in his chest. A purr, a real, deep, resonant purr. The sound vibrated against Sarah's ribs, warm and alive. He wasn't afraid. He was fascinated. Have you ever seen the world anew through the eyes of a creature who almost lost it? Life moved forward on softer feet. Rocket officially moved indoors. His cardboard box was replaced with a plush bed tucked beside the old wood stove in the living room, which Sarah kept diligently stoked. He explored the house with his unique hop-drag propulsion, mapping the rugs, investigating under furniture, mastering the art of navigating around chair legs. Sarah learned his rhythms, his bursts of energetic exploration, his long sun-drenched naps by the stove, his intense focus while watching snowflakes fall past the window. She bought proper kitten toys, crinkly balls, a feather wand, and discovered his incredible agility. He could bat a ball with startling precision, using his powerful front legs and the counterweight of his tail. He could launch himself after the feather wand with surprising speed and height, landing with a soft thud and immediately ready for the next pounce. He wasn't hindered. He was adapted. His movements were unique, powerful, and undeniably feline. Grace redefined. The crow became a distant memory, seen only occasionally as a stark black speck against the winter sky, high and silent. Rocket would watch it pass, his tail giving a single slow twitch. But there was no fear in his eyes anymore, only a watchful awareness. The shadow had lifted. Sarah continued to take pictures, not just snapshots now, but portraits. Rocket sleeping, a picture of profound peace, sunlight gilding his fur. Rocket mid-launch after a toy, muscles coiled, eyes alight with fierce joy, suspended impossibly in the air for a fraction of a second. Rocket gazing out the window, his profile thoughtful, against the snowy landscape. Rocket offering Sarah a slow blink as she sat reading on the rug beside him. She captured his spirit, his resilience, his curiosity, his quiet contentment. She didn't think about making him a sensation. She simply wanted to document the miracle of him, the sheer, ordinary wonder of his existence in her life. One blustery March afternoon, with the snow finally receding to reveal patches of muddy earth and stubborn patches of white, Sarah sat on the living room floor, sorting through the digital photos on her laptop. Rocket was sprawled beside her, belly up, paws curled, deeply asleep after a vigorous play session. As she scrolled, a narrative unfolded, not just of a kitten's growth, but of a profound journey. From the desperate, muddy creature shivering in the woodshed to the sleek, confident companion purring beside her. From conquering porch steps to mastering the art of the rug slide. The pictures told a story of triumph not over adversity, but through it, with a grace that defied expectation. Impulse, her heart beating a little faster, she created a simple online album. Not on a major platform, but on a quiet corner of the internet dedicated to special needs pets. She titled it simply, Rocket, Learning to Fly. She selected a dozen photos. The early dawn visits on the porch, the slow blink in the weak autumn, sun, the intense focus of his hop drag across the snow-dusted porch boards, the impossible mid-air suspension chasing a feather, the profound peace of sleep by the fire. She added a short caption, writing from the heart, "This is Rocket, born without hind legs, but born with an extraordinary spirit. He doesn't walk, he flies on determination. He found me when I was lost, and together we're learning how to navigate a world that isn't always built for us, but is filled with beauty nonetheless. He teaches me every day what it means to truly live." She hit post. It felt like sending a message in a bottle out onto a vast ocean. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few kind comments from fellow special needs pet lovers. She closed. The laptop reached over and gently stroked Rocket's exposed belly. He stretched, a long, luxurious ripple of contentment, his purr deepening. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, carrying the first faint scent of thawing earth. Spring was whispering at the edges of winter's grip. The response wasn't a wave, it was a quiet, persistent tide. Likes appeared, then comments. Not dozens, but hundreds, then thousands. People weren't just clicking, they were feeling. That mid-air photo, he truly is flying. The look in his eyes, pure warrior spirit. Your caption made me cry. We all need a rocket. The slow blink photo shattered me. Such trust. He moves with more grace than most four-legged cats. Thank you for sharing his light. Messages poured in, not just praising Rocket's spirit, but thanking Sarah for sharing their story, for showing the beauty in difference, for the quiet reminder of resilience. People shared stories of their own special needs pets, their own losses, their own journeys through grief and loneliness. A community formed in the comments section, a virtual porch swing where people connected over shared vulnerability and unexpected joy. One email stood out. It was from a small nonprofit organization that designed and provided custom mobility aids for animals. They'd seen Rocket's photos, particularly the ones showcasing his powerful shoulders and unique propulsion. "We believe," the email read, "we could design something for Rocket, not to fix him, but to enhance his natural abilities, to give him even more freedom to explore, maybe even to fly a little further. We'd be honored to create it for him at no cost. His spirit is exactly what we strive to support." Sarah read the email 3 times, tears blurring the screen. She looked down at Rocket, who had woken and was watching her with his calm, green gaze. She scooped him up, holding him close, his purr vibrating against her cheek. "They want to help you fly even more, little one," she whispered, her voice thick. Rocket pressed his forehead against her chin, a soft, warm pressure. Acceptance. Trust. The journey continued. The custom wheelchair arrived on a day bursting with spring promise. Crocuses pushed through the softening earth, and the lake shimmered, free of ice. The device was a marvel of lightweight engineering, a simple padded harness that supported his hindquarters, attached to 2 small, sturdy wheels. It wasn't restrictive. It was liberating. Rocket was suspicious at first. He sniffed the strange contraption, nudged it with his nose, backed away. Sarah didn't force it. She let the harness sit near his bed for days, letting him investigate it on his terms. She placed treats near it, then on it. Finally, one sunny morning, with infinite patience and soft encouragement, she gently eased him into the harness, securing the straps with trembling fingers. He stood frozen for a moment, feeling the new support under his hindquarters, the slight pressure of the harness. He took a tentative step forward with his front legs. The wheels turned smoothly. He stopped, looked back at the wheels, looked at Sarah, took another step. The wheels moved again. A spark lit in his eyes. Understanding, possibility. He took another step, then another. Then with a burst of his powerful shoulders, he lunged. The wheels spun freely. He didn't drag, he rolled. He zipped across the living room rug, a blur of gray fur and spinning wheels, skidding to a stop. By the bookshelf. He turned, his eyes wide with astonishment, then pure, unadulterated joy. He let out a sound Sarah had never heard before, a high-pitched, excited trill. He did it again and again. Racing from the couch to the fireplace, maneuvering around chair legs with increasing confidence, his tail held high like a victory banner. He wasn't just moving, he was gliding. He was, finally, effortlessly, flying. Sarah laughed, tears streaming down her face, pure joy erupting from a place deep within that had been frozen for too long. She grabbed her camera, not to capture a viral moment, but to capture this moment. The unbridled ecstasy of freedom on Rocket's face as he discovered a new dimension to his world. The picture she took, Rocket mid-glide, wheels a-blur, ears forward, mouth slightly open in a silent trill of delight, sunlight catching the joy in his eyes, wasn't just a photo. It was a testament to spirit, to adaptation, to the soaring. Freedom found when someone believes in you enough to give you wings, or in this case, wheels. She posted that single photo, just that one. Caption: First flight. The quiet tide became a wave. The photo resonated far beyond the special needs pet community. News outlets picked it up. Talk shows mentioned it. Rocket the wheelchair kitten became a gentle beacon, not of pity, but of awe-inspiring ability and pure, infectious joy. Donations flooded the small non-profit that made his wheelchair, allowing them to help countless other animals. Sarah was inundated with messages, not just about Rocket, but from people sharing how his story gave them hope during their own struggles, their own moments of feeling broken or grounded. He became a symbol, not of limitation, but of the boundless potential within adaptation, the incredible resilience of life, and the transformative power of unconditional love and support. Sarah never sought the spotlight. She managed Rocket's sudden fame with quiet grace, using the platform only to advocate for special needs animals and the organizations that helped them, and to share moments of their simple, beautiful life. The viral storm eventually settled into a gentle, supportive breeze. The real story wasn't the fame. It was the life they built together within the walls of the old house by the lake, now filled with light and the quiet hum of Rocket's purr. Spring deepened into summer. Rocket's world expanded beyond the house. Sarah built a secure, enclosed catio off the back porch, filled with ramps, platforms, and soft grass. Rocket navigated it masterfully in his wheelchair, rolling up ramps to bask in the sun, investigating every leaf and insect, watching birds from the safety of his screened haven. He learned to navigate gentle slopes in the backyard under Sarah's watchful eye, his wheels churning through the grass, his movements confident and swift. He still had his hop-drag propulsion for tight spaces or quick bursts, but the wheelchair granted him effortless distance, speed, and a new kind of feline elegance. Sarah's life was irrevocably changed. The crushing grief for Grandma May hadn't disappeared, but it had woven itself into the fabric of her being, softened by Rocket's persistent presence. The house no longer echoed with emptiness. It resonated with life. The click-click of Rocket's wheels on hardwood, the thump of him landing from a short hop, the contented sigh as he settled in his bed. She started writing again, not forced, but inspired. Essays about Rocket, about grief, about finding unexpected wings in the most broken places. She tended Grandma May's garden, not with dutiful sadness, but with a sense of nurturing connection, Rocket often rolling beside her, supervising from the shade. One warm August evening, Sarah sat on the porch swing, the lake a sheet of molten gold under the setting sun. The sea glass chimes sang softly in the gentle breeze. Rocket was curled beside her, not in his wheelchair, but sprawled comfortably on the cushion, having rolled himself up the ramp and then hopped onto the swing for cuddles. His breathing was deep and even, his fur warm against her leg. She stroked his back, feeling the powerful muscles beneath, the smooth curve where his legs weren't, the soft rhythm of his purr. She looked out at the water, at the fireflies beginning to wink in the gathering dusk, at the familiar, beloved shape of her grandmother's garden, now vibrant with late summer blooms. The final gift wasn't the wheelchair, or the fame, or even the profound bond they shared. It was the quiet understanding that settled deep within Sarah as she sat there, bathed in the golden light, a warm, purring weight beside her. Healing wasn't about erasing the brokenness. It wasn't about going back to who she was before the loss. It was about learning to live beautifully, fully, alongside the scars. It was about finding that the very things that seemed to ground you, grief, limitation, fear, could, with love and patience and a fierce spirit like Rocket's, become the unexpected launch pad for a different kind of flight. Rocket hadn't learned to fly despite his missing legs. He'd learned to fly because of the unique strength and perspective his difference forged. And in saving him, in believing in him, Sarah had finally given herself permission to soar beyond her own frozen shores. The love we offer, especially to the broken and the brave, doesn't just heal them. It becomes the wind beneath our own wings. Trust, once shattered, can be rebuilt, stronger at the broken places, a silent language more profound than words. And sometimes, the second chance we desperately offer to another is the very lifeline that pulls us back into the light, teaching us that the most extraordinary journeys often begin with a single, impossible leap of faith and the quiet courage to simply begin again. You stayed till the end. Thank you. If it felt like a soft hug or a warm purr in your heart, subscribing lets me bring you more moments like this.